You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today's topic is the Season 1 two-part episode, The Cat and the Claw. Two-parter, not one, but two. Did Catwoman really warrant a two-part introduction, Joshua?
I am glad you asked that, because people who are astute listeners to the show might notice that we have been moving more or less chronologically, with a little bit of jumping around, but really just within plus or minus 2 episodes. But we are taking a big hard turn back to the first third of the season here. And I still don't know if Catwoman on her own merits when they were writing the show warranted the 2 episodes, but they were glad they had them. Because do you know what movie came out the year that Batman the Animated Series debuted?
Batman Returns.
That's right. And that's why these were the first 2 episodes that they aired.
Whoa, these were the first 2 episodes
These
that
were
aired.
the first 2 episodes that aired.
Not the first 2 would have aired, but okay, all right.
It wasn't the plan, right? Like, I mean, we've talked about how weird a choice
Right.
Man-Bat would have been.
The production, between the production schedule, the release schedule, and the chronological schedule, it's very confusing.
It is. But the actual release, this was it, and it was because they were trying to piggyback on with the popularity, the unexpected popularity of Michelle Pfeiffer's portrayal of Selina Kyle / Catwoman in Batman Returns.
Yeah, that makes sense, and you can actually see they took a lot of inspiration, and in fact, I think they were mandated by the studio to make the design of Catwoman based specifically on Michelle Pfeiffer. Notice she's got blonde hair, her build similarly, even like the costume is very, very similar in style to how we see Michelle Pfeiffer in Returns.
Yes, the character stuff, not at all.
No.
But the look of Selina Kyle, yes, and I guess kind of the look of Catwoman. I actually, as part of my style conversation, I feel like Catwoman is criminally under-designed here.
Yeah, I think so too, actually. It's very simplistic.
Which is a BTAS hallmark, but it's simplified to the point where she is...
It's generic, though, right?
Super generic. For those of you who may not recall, Catwoman in Batman Returns was in a shiny, like, pleather black suit that she stitched together herself so that the stitches were all very visible. Now, there is character resonance for that in that movie that would not make sense for the version that they use in Batman the Animated Series, but you can't argue with the dramatic visual that creates. They did not bother to give any kind of dramatic visual to her in this show.
No.
In costume.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. She's just kind of generic, forgettable. There's not the thing about all these the character designs, especially the villain designs for at least for their A-list baddies. You remember them; they're all pretty iconic. Catwoman, though, I don't think.
No, many of them became the look of these characters in other media. Like we talked about, Mignola's approach to Mr. Freeze has become the look of Mr. Freeze in other media.
Yeah, the definitive look, yes.
Joker is an amalgamation of the best Jokers from comics, right? Like a distillation of that idea. You get that kind of thing. But with Catwoman, even at the time that this show came out, she had a much more interesting look in the comics. At least a little more colorful. And so, yeah, it's a weird choice. It's a strange choice. But that movie is the reason this was the 2-parter that they led the whole series with.
One other thing I noted about Catwoman when looking at the episode is I actually didn't realize Red Claw was a character original to Batman the Animated Series. And it makes a lot, now that I'm looking at it, this character makes way more sense to me now.
Red Claw or Catwoman?
Red Claw.
Okay. Yeah.
Catwoman versus Red Claw still only kind of makes sense, but...
Well, we'll talk about it. It's almost like there's one whole plot with Red Claw and half a plot that gets Catwoman involved in the main plot.
Right.
And it's not bad. It's fine. It gets us to a place where we can have all of these really great set pieces. We'll talk more about that. I mean, from that perspective, by the way, I think that these are actually a really good couple of showcases for this new show that no one had ever seen before.
Right.
Because you get a lot of really good character stuff with Bruce and Selina, and also Batman and Catwoman, and sometimes Batman and Selina, and some, like this mix and match. And these really fantastic set pieces, which is an ongoing BTAS
right
raison d'etre, right?
Yeah, maybe a good demo for the show. Well, Joshua, let's before we delve too into the weeds here, what about the title card?
I like it. I don't love it, but I like it.
It's pretty literal, right? Like,
It's very literal,
Hey, look,
yeah.
it's cat eyes, claws in front of it.
Now, the nice thing is, it's pretty obviously Isis's cat eyes. Like, they are not generic cat eyes. They use the very same kind of distinctive design that they use for Catwoman's cat from the show. And then they use the actual literal red claw symbol over it. It's the cat and the claw. Here's the thing that I liked a lot. The string instruments for the first part. Now, the music gets much more kind of generically ominous, and I say generically because we've talked about how good the music is for this show, but generically ominous in the second part. But in the first part, it's all these strings. And I am not a music theory person, but in my own admittedly limited experience, the use of string instruments on the storytelling side of whatever's going on in the music always feels like it's a very tense moment for me. Like we are stretching the tension of the piece.
Right.
And so those strings going on kind of behind this otherwise kind of generic but striking title card telling me there's going to be a lot of pulling things in different directions in this episode.
Okay, that's a good point. There's a lot of tension there. Yeah. I mean,
a lot of people at odds with one another for very different reasons.
Right.
Like it's there's not just one tension towards A or B. You've got kind of like this web of tension where people are pulling different directions and sometimes don't even realize they're pulling against each other because of secret identity shenanigans or whatever. That was the thing I really enjoyed. The strings almost by themselves in the first piece of music was like, that's really setting my expectations for this episode.
I think the visual comparison to Batman Returns is important to note, but outside of that, I don't really think there's any strong ties to that film whatsoever, and it's not even nearly as gothic as that. It's really just Catwoman. Now here,
they were selling things.
I do think the decision to make Catwoman. Let's go ahead and start talking off Selena Kyle as she's portrayed in Batman the Animated Series.
I like her character portrayal very much. As much as I find her visual meh, I find her character choices very positive, except for the thing that you're going to bring up because it hasn't aged particularly
okay, so Joshua, I'll just be real here up front. This entire episode, I think, hasn't aged well. I don't think it's nearly as timeless as the best episodes of the show at all.
No, I can agree with that.
But she's great. Her chemistry with Bruce Wayne is excellent.
Her chemistry with Batman is excellent.
Yes.
And is different than her chemistry with Bruce Wayne, which is pretty great.
Right? I dig that. And I love how while Bruce Wayne was chasing her, all she wanted to do was get to Batman.
Yeah.
It was really kind of a Lois and Clark sort of deal there,
It was, as much as Superman, Clark, and Lois are kind of that love triangle, this is like a love parallelogram. Because Batman is intrigued by Catwoman, but is not interested. And Catwoman is interested in Batman. Bruce is unexpectedly smitten with Selena, but I buy it. She's pretty striking, pretty incredible person. And she at first doesn't care about him at all, but kind of warms up to him over time because he's a legitimately good guy. It's like a love parallelogram.
Right. Yes. No, exactly. But she's also an animal rights activist. Now, that inherently is not bad. I actually think inherently that's kind of a cool idea.
I think it's a good choice for Catwoman.
Yeah.
But the implementation.
The implementation's a little rough because I feel like the writer's room here, circa 1992 or 1993, didn't really have a good grasp of like what animal rights activism is really about or how they communicate their passions or basically it's like guys who didn't really know much about animal rights activism either thought they did or didn't know how to talk about it and wrote the character that way, so it comes across as really clunky and disingenuous in a lot of ways. It's like, look, guys, she's an animal rights activist. Look, she's saying things because she's passionate about animal rights and environments, and it just came across as a little tone deaf, maybe is the word.
Yeah.
It might not be the right word, but it's not.
It's not as resonant as it could be.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Like if we want to toy with a fascination with cats, animal rights activism is a good non-deranged reason for that. If we want to create a reason for her to be a gentlewoman thief, like there's a bit of a Robin Hood, steal from the rich, give to the poor, in this case, the poor is the animals, I like that choice too.
Yeah, definitely.
Except that that's not really the point. That is the point of her character. It's not really the point of these two episodes, which are supposed to be introducing us to her character.
Right, that's the thing. It's like a weird thing she's passionate about, and it's kind of connected because the whole thing is she's trying to stop this evil corporation from moving in and building a giant resort on top of the Wild Cat Reserve or whatever. I get that. That's kind of a cool idea, but it really doesn't feel it goes away for most of the episode.
it's really the bookends, right?
Right.
Like the big cats are very important in the last moments of the show, and the reason for Selena being out stealing / interested in this land is very important for the very beginning of the show. But in the middle, it goes real mush as far as an ongoing impetus for her to do things.
It puts her character where she needs to be to encounter Red Claw, which is when the real,
Right.
where I don't even say the main drive, but just the villain who takes up the most screen, the conflict that eats up most of the screen time is, Red Claw's in town. They're doing all sorts of shenanigans in here.
Either that or the romance, right?
Right. It's one of those two.
The dates between Bruce and Selena.
Yes.
Which also turn into action set pieces. Really like that. But I'm with you. I'm struggling for the word because I don't think tone deaf is quite
It's not.
right.
I feel like that's more offensive because it's not like that offensive, but it's like not educated. It's talking about a thing. It's clearly not educated about. What I'm not sure is how uneducated. Like, did they realize how uneducated they were about it when they started talking about it? I don't know.
Doesn't serve Selena
No.
as much as we want it to serve. We can sit here and talk about how it checks boxes for Catwoman in
sure.
a way that we really like.
Right.
But in the terms of this story, which also introduces her, it doesn't serve her as well as we would like it to serve her. It doesn't serve her as well as Nora serves Mr. Freeze.
Oh, no.
It doesn't
No.
serve her as well as, Harvey's internal issues and Grace serve him.
Right.
It's workmanlike.
It
does its job.
It also seems like they were just trying to find a way to separate Selena Kyle from other villains.
Yeah,
right? Like,
definitely.
What's the drive? Like you're saying, what's the thing that's driving her? And
That isn't derangement.
right.
I mean, the hallmark of other Batman characters.
I really think they could have done the more traditional Robin Hood route and it would have been fine. I think that would taken down the corporate man, stealing the money. I think that would have worked well for me. I mean, I know in later certain portrayals in the comics, she's even like a prostitute stealing from like there's a lot of.
I think the less said about Frank Miller's accidental sort of soft reboot of Catwoman, the better.
Oh, was that Frank Miller? Okay, never
That
mind.
happened in Batman Year One.
Pretend that didn't happen. Oh, that was year one. I have that comic on my shelf. I should have known that one.
Well, Batman Year One is a wonderful story that, by and large, does exactly the thing that it was supposed to do. But one of the things it does, because Frank Miller is who he is kind of wrecks Catwoman because she stops being this gentlewoman thief Robin Hood figure and instead becomes a prostitute because Frank Miller. So, yeah, it's just, yeah. Hey, thank goodness they didn't do that one for the kids show.
Oh, thank God. Well, let's talk about Red Claw a little bit. Original to this show.
Yes.
Fun fact, voiced by Kate Mulgrew, a.k.a. Captain Catherine Janeway on Star Trek Voyager.
And more important to me, a.k.a. Red from Orange is the New Black.
Also good.
But I mentioned that one because until I realized she was Red Claw, I thought that was her first flirtation with Eastern European accents.
Nope.
Nope. She'd been the Red Claw.
Back in 92, all the way back in the day. That was just a nice little touch. So this is I love the show cast actors before they're like known for something really, which is really nice. So that was a nice touch. Other aspects of this show, this episode that don't age well at all. Red Claw, period. Red. Hey guys, we just took down the Berlin Wall about 5 years ago.
Right.
Russia, the big enemy, fell down. So now we're gonna make all terrorists like ex-communists or related to Soviet Russia somehow.
Yeah.
Blatant, terrible Russian accent.
This is a real late 80s, early 90s action.
And even
movie
plays into the
problem.
weird caricature of strong Russian women, if you know what I'm talking about. How
that's
they're
true.
like big ripped, it's definitely.
She is drawn somewhat more in the manner of the male characters. Like, it's for a show that prides itself on the stripped down dudes are built like this, ladies are built like this.
Right.
She does split the difference between those figures in a way that is remarkable. Wonder Woman won't.
No.
Barda will.
Right.
I mean, and for those of you who know who these characters are, great. Otherwise, we'll talk about them more when we get to Justice League. But I mean, there are some people who split that difference. But Red Claw, might be playing into that stereotype.
Again, it feels like it's from the 90s.
Right.
Like late 80s, early 90s. I mean, X-Men, the animated series, had some of the same problems. Like, this is not uncommon. There are other non-superhero shows that had lots of anti-communist rhetoric.
I remember from my youth jokes about the East German Olympic team. Whatever the women's team was, it was, are we sure they're ladies? That kind of thing. Less enlightened time. In my lifetime, I shudder to say, but...
hey, it is what it is. So I say that to say, Red Claw does the job that needs. Again, talking about workmanlike things. She shows up. She does what she stirs the conflict. She does what she needs to do. It's just one of those things. Conceptually, the character is a product of a different era.
Yeah.
And not both conceptually and how she's portrayed. You're like, ooh, this has not this is not aged super well. I would not put this episode in front of a child and say, look at this timeless classic.
Yeah, it's true. There's another way that happens. And Red Claw is a good example of this, because one thing I will say that I really appreciate about both Catwoman and Red Claw in these episodes is they are both hyper competent.
Oh, Joshua, we're about to talk about the other thing that I think hasn't aged well, so we're going to allow that.
I want to talk about the good part of it though first, because there is a real good part here.
Sure.
Red Claw's gang of highly trained military guys never question her. She is operating in Gotham City, which ought to be an automatic shutdown for any lesser terrorist.
Right.
But she is managing a crew, and they are more or less doing... Batman does thwart them, of course, because it's Batman's story. But she is extremely competent in her job. We see this mirrored in Catwoman. She is extremely competent as a thief. She nearly outmaneuvers Batman, nearly outfights Batman, and does, in the end, still escape from him more than once.
However, this quote happened in the episode.
Hit me.
Red Claw, woman, I'm an equal opportunity crime fighter.
And what's more, literally the first thing Batman says about Catwoman is, well, I guess our new cat burglar is a woman.
Right. Listen, Joshua, I consider myself a feminist. Women are just as capable, if not more capable, in a lot of situations at handling and leading, I would argue.
And we want to see that reflected in fiction.
And I want to absolutely want to see that reflected in fiction. And it is here, but the episode goes out of its way to let us know, hey guys, we're feminists. Look. Oh, women can do cool stuff too. Look how cool that is. It feels, again, is tone deaf the right word? I don't know, but it feels
dated.
Like it's dated.
It definitely feels dated.
It's like the writers probably I'm sure we're all men on this, and it's like, how do we communicate that we believe in women being equal opportunists? So instead of like having a woman come on and write, it's more like, let's write about it. And it just hasn't aged well, especially in the year of our Lord 2018, in a post Me Too, post Harvey Weinstein, post 2016 election year. You're like, ooh man, this is not coming across great.
I think the part that they did well is the part I say where they are obviously competent.
Yes,
and hyper competent.
Yes, they're great.
But the fact that the hero of our show is pointing out how unusual it is that he should run into women that are this competent is the problem. If it were some dirtbag, if it were the mob boss,
right.
If it were even Gordon, I wouldn't love it. But if it were Gordon pointing this out, it would be hanging a lampshade on it in a good way. When Batman does it, he's the hero of your show. It does feel a little bit like attitude insertion of the writers,
right.
Or it's the attitude we're supposed to have.
That's the thing.
Like
again, I'm sure this show is targeted at boys, teenage. I think probably age 9 to 14 or something like that.
Sounds
sweet
about
spot.
Right.
I mean, so I'm sure at the time the idea to the stereotype for boys where men are all tough. You know what I mean? You grew up. You were alive. You were growing
there.
up. You know. So I know that plays into it. Maybe they're trying to appeal to that demographic. I don't know. It just in today's world, it doesn't fly super
I agree.
well. Again, it doesn't take away from it does not take away from the characters. It just doth protest too much, sort of thing.
We want the ecological side to serve Selena more, and it just doesn't. And we want the competency of the women to not be called into question by our hero.
Right.
If Batman hadn't commented on it, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, probably. And again, because by saying that, by making that statement, the implication is, now, intentional or not, the implication is, oh, women typically don't do this.
Absolutely.
Women typically aren't capable of this.
Like Batman didn't just get done thwarting an evil botanist a couple of months ago.
Right, exactly.
Where have you been?
Right.
It's so strange, right? That like 2/3 of the show would be so progressive, honestly, in its presentation of these two very competent women, and then they would just undermine the whole thing. I mean, I can't blame them. I really do.
It is a product of the time.
It's a product of its
time. The culture has come a long way since then, especially in
It's just depressing.
It is, because even the things you love still had problematic things in them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's where we were at in 1992.
And that's where you can bring that into the generic Eastern Europeanness of Red Claw, who also might be a hyper-masculine woman. Nobody really draws attention to that in the way that they do her femininity. But you make a good point. Like, that was in the Zeitgeist at the time.
Yes. Last thing, and this is me splitting hairs, but I feel like it's a word that doesn't get thrown around lightly in 2018. Gordon calls the Red Claw and the Syndicate savages, I'm not saying it was a wrong thing to say because they're not talking about, indigenous people. So thank God. But my thing was, do we really? That seems like a stronger word. Now, I know that there's a lot of cultural context that's grown up around that since 1992. So I don't know if that's a problem. I'm sure it wouldn't be written like that today, but it was definitely one of those, I don't think this is technically incorrect for what they're trying to say, but also that word just has a new meaning in 2018 that it didn't have in 1992.
It's true. I didn't trip up on that myself because I was with them that they were trying to establish how dangerous, like how willing they are to just take life wantonly.
Right.
But yeah, boy, if they're going to choose that word, I'm actually glad that they're Caucasian people now.
Yeah, exactly. If it had been any other race, I would have been
the worst.
I would have been pretty rough. But that's why I was more of a question mark. I was like, this is a strong question mark. I don't think it's incorrect because you're right. They're trying to reinforce that these aren't just bad guys. These aren't just thugs. These guys are killers. They're brutal. They sink low.
And we needed that because we have this virus MacGuffin that is going to kill the city potentially. We need to believe that they are the kinds of people who would use that.
Right.
But wow, yeah.
Just a thought. Again, just a thought. Again, they couldn't have, that's a word that back in, heck, dude, one of my favorite songs from the Pocahontas soundtrack involves the word savages, but hey.
Significantly more problematic than its usage
here.
But
significant. Yeah. I'm saying that that movie came out in 1995 or 6. I'm just saying, I don't necessarily fault the writers on this one. It's just an interesting cultural artifact. When you look back at it, you're like, this is definitely made in the early 90s. Unlike the feminism thing, I feel like this is a lot more. This is not like some misunderstanding.
That is our context going back.
Yes.
That is not it being a product of its time. It's that word means something different to us now.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. I feel like that's largely the downsides of this episode.
Yeah, I think
that overall...
Yeah. Now that we get the nasty stuff out of the way...
I really like these episodes.
Yeah.
They're not perfect. The setup does not feed into the main conflict quite as strongly as we might like. But they just go from set piece to set piece to set piece. There's probably 10 big picture
there's
set
car
pieces.
Chases, there's train heists, there's, gosh.
Well, it actually starts, the very first thing we have is that chase scene between Batman and Catwoman, which is incredibly dynamic and shows her competency in the process, while also showing that Batman is some next level himself, right?
Oh, yes.
Like anybody else, she'd be long gone. He's already there. I would even go so far as to say that in a much smaller way, the charity auction for Bruce Wayne is kind of a set piece. It would fall between the cracks between train heists and stuff.
Is this a thing? Okay, Joshua, again, this is me being really naive. Is this a thing that still happens? Do you still donate large sums of money to have a date with a millionaire? Because that feels like a 90s thing too.
My gut says that that's not a thing that's happened since 1950, but it got into the pop culture as a thing that could happen.
Because I feel like, didn't this happen in either Batman Forever or Batman and Robin also?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
One of them.
Yeah, I don't remember which one.
Val Kilmer?
I think that one, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Or Poison, I don't know.
Much like Sadie Hawkins Day dances,
right?
And high schoolers carrying around an egg like it's a baby,
right?
I don't think these are things that have actually been done in the world in decades, but they do kind of.
It's still part of the culture, the fiction. You're like, we can draw from this well. Yeah,
right?
we can draw from this well. Okay, yeah.
And so, yeah, now when I compare that to the train heist or to the giant fire at the end or all that stuff, it's not that kind of a set piece. But there's some huge character stuff for Bruce Wayne.
Oh, man.
Right here.
Hey, man. She buys into the donation for the cats. He comes up, and she's like, I'm letting you off the hook. And he's like, oh, I'm not letting you off the hook. Ooh.
Do you know the best part for me of that I'm not letting you off the hook? He blushes.
He does. Batman blushed. That doesn't happen often.
He blushes because he is trying to figure out how to get the date with this woman. There are some things in this episode that undermine its feminism. When I say he came over expecting a date, it's because that's what she just bought for a ridiculous amount of money. When he finds out that she's not going to do that date, he awkwardly puts himself back in there because he wants the date with this woman so badly. It is a remarkable amount of vulnerability for Bruce Wayne.
Right. Well, what do you mean she doesn't want to go on a date with me? Ooh.
Except that is an interesting question and a different way that they could have taken it. I read
they don't
as,
chase that scene.
No, I want this thing.
Oh, sure.
I didn't know who you were 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I use the word smitten.
Yeah.
It's not love at first sight. He's Bruce Wayne. He's not going to marry her tomorrow.
Right.
Who is he? Harvey Dent? No.
But he's curious that this woman would come out of nowhere and lay this kind of money down. She's striking, she's gorgeous. And then, like, the thing that, at least if it was me, the thing that makes him more attracted to her is the fact that she basically says, "Nah, I don't really need you." You're like, "Ooh, okay, now I'm curious."
And going forward with their relationship, that I like that she's not really into Bruce Wayne. Like she's polite, and that's why she says yes.
Well, her friend has to talk her into going on the date in the first
He's
place.
going to be a good connection. I mean, they never say Gotham's favorite son, but I mean that's a thing that I bring with me from comic book stuff. You should want to do this as a good connection, if nothing else. It's not necessarily a love connection, but go do the thing. But he manages, just by being a good guy with Bruce Wayne's connections, to really impress Selina as Bruce Wayne. She says out loud, "I'm beginning to like this guy," and I think it's sincere.
I think she's sincere too.
It's so good. It's so good.
Although I do find it hilarious that as she's prepping for the date, she's all about getting back to the street and wanting to go on a date with Batman. That's a great tension there.
Let's talk about the secret identity shenanigans in this episode, because I like them a lot.
Oh, I do too. It's so much fun.
You have sideways jokes about how they're going to be working late in that scene.
She's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna be working late too."
I'll also be working late. You have people being interested in other people that are also the same person, but not being interested.
Different identities, though.
I just wish it was Batman on the other side of this door. Oh, man. It is.
It's so much fun. The tension there is, I'm telling you, it reminds me again a lot of the Lois and Clark thing. Yeah. Oh, Lois is into Superman. Superman not interested in her. Clark Kent's really interested in her, though. Snaking its own tail. Yes,
it's that, but so much more, because...
there's actually there's great chemistry here.
Yeah, yes. But and also, you've got 2 more people in it.
Yes.
Or you have 4 people
instead of 3 people. It's like if Lois Lane had another secret identity.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I feel for Batman at the end, because by the end of the show, he knows that Selina Kyle is also Catwoman. She does not know that Bruce Wayne and Batman are the same person. But we can put this all together, where he now knows that the woman in this suit that he has to turn over to the cops is also this woman that has been very intriguing to him. And I loved the end line between them when she says, "You can't deny that there's something between us." And he said, "You're right, there is. The law."
Yeah.
Now, he's in costume. He has to hide who he really is. He does not inject that line with a lot of emotion.
Right.
But knowing everything we know, he's not happy.
Oh, no, he's super
not
bummed out.
enjoying
He's super
himself.
bummed out. And it's normally this kind of line delivery where they telegraph exactly kind of the cracked mirror thing that we talk about sometimes is a little heavy-handed. But in this scenario, because there's that romantic connection, I feel like it feels really genuine and really lands. And it makes me feel for Batman. You're like, "Oh, man, you love this girl and you want to go for her, and there's a real chemistry there, but she breaks the law."
And there has to be a part of his mind that's thinking, she has a nightlife too. It is an incompatible nightlife with Batman's because she breaks the law.
Right.
But if anybody, this woman that I'm very interested in, if anybody was going to get what I do every night, it's her. And by the way, you may not be aware, Batman and Catwoman are actually engaged in the comic books right now.
Ooh.
And it makes sense. It makes sense. She's trying to reform.
They have very similar ideas, very similar goals, I should say. Different tactics.
Yes. And her tension between gentlewoman thief and vigilante, this has slid a lot depending on era. And I mean, it's been all over the place just since I've been reading comic books. But there's always this tension there where it's like, if I could just stop stealing, we could be together.
But she's like a social justice warrior who fights crime, though, in a lot of ways, you know.
No, I agree.
And she steals from the wealthy. She's trying to take down the corrupt politicians. Yeah.
That's a good point. Again, they do so much in these 2 episodes. I don't want to complain, but we just said that the ecological social justice warriorness of Catwoman does not serve Selina as much as we'd like it to.
Right.
It would perhaps have helped if the person that she was stealing from in that initial scene, we knew somehow was undermining the ecological effort.
Yes.
They don't have time. They start and move.
She's just stealing from someone. Yeah.
But, you know, it's that kind of thing where it's like, I need to know that she's stealing from the right people.
I want to see it now. I want to see a Selina Kyle as written by a social justice warrior now.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I can hook you up with some comics. Knowing that she is stealing from the right people, which we definitely are there by the time she's breaking into Multigon. But when we're introduced to her, we don't know yet.
We lack the context.
Yeah. It would be good. It would be good.
It would help. And this is where you get in the weird tension with Batman, too, when you really get analytical and break down. He's existing outside the law anyway. So technically, he's breaking the law.
Oh, well, yeah.
All the time.
Vigilantism is illegal.
It is illegal. And so when he says what separates us, the law, that's an interesting statement when you really dig into it. And it also says something about the psychology of Batman. Because he's really not like the law is really not between them. He thinks he is because he is trying to uphold the law in his own Batman sort of way. And this is where you get into kind of the hypocrisy of Batman. I'm not saying he's a hypocrite. I'm saying
there is a tension there also, right? Like Gotham City falls into the sea without Batman,
right?
But he is serving the law by breaking it, that's complicated.
Exactly. So it's interesting whenever he slaps the cuffs on her, though. It's like because she's kind of doing the same thing in her own way. It's different. In the blatant stealing, there's a lot of things she's doing that aren't okay. I'm saying, though, at the end of the day, we've seen Batman look at Daggett. We've seen him try to take down other corrupt, wealthy men. And so we know he's about that. And she's doing that in her own way. Now, what she's doing is more blatantly illegal. More straight to your face illegal, but really he's breaking the law too. Yeah. Anyway, that's just an interesting philosophy. I'm just like looking at the idea of what's going on here, and none of this is really in the episode at all. I just think it's really fascinating when you get to that closing line and it says, "What's between us? The law."
The law.
It's telling us less about the romance, more about the psychology.
It's about Batman. Yeah. Where his mind is at with that, because he knows he's breaking the law. He's not an idiot. But he's breaking the law to uphold the law.
But he can justify in his mind why it's okay for him to break the law and why the law separates them because it more or less his code is what separates them more than the law.
Yeah, and the conversation that they have had that they will have more in this show, but also in decades of comics, is that when she stops stealing and operates as a vigilante, he's fine with her. It's just the stealing.
Right.
Stop stealing.
Right. Says the very ultra-wealthy billionaire.
Okay, let's talk about that. So, when you go to the earliest Batman stories, he is very much protecting the wealth of rich people, which is a weird choice in 1939.
Oh, God, yeah.
It is a weird choice.
Depression era right there.
Ooh. Yes. Let's go across the street and look at Superman, who was very much a populist and was fighting rich fat cats and tycoons.
Right.
And that is who he was fighting, not crazy mad scientists. Not for nothing, the second crazy mad scientist that Superman ever fights, Lex Luthor, the one that catches on and hangs around, was written to be the person responsible for causing the depression in Superman comics. Ooh. Okay, so even then, they're tying it together. But we go across the street. We need a detective. That means we need crimes. That means we need jewels heisted. That means we need bearer bonds to vanish. We need that kind of stuff to happen. And because Bruce Wayne is rich, it's very easy for him to have rich friends. But you get not very far down the road. I mean, within 5 years, and you have the writers realizing we need to do something a little different here. And Catwoman, first appearance is actually 1940, okay? Within 1 year, we have a socialite robbing other socialites that Batman says, this far, no further. Like, I think they were realizing the problem that we can look back and see.
Of course, yeah.
And it's why I feel like there's a much more nuanced approach of who are you stealing from?
Right. Yes. No, exactly. And I bring all this up to say is we've kind of dug into this rabbit hole. Again, I'll go into that starting with that closing statement, the last line.
Yes.
There is an inherently contradictory nature to Batman, and that's one of the things that makes him so fascinating. Going all the way back to the historical roots, I'm really glad you brought that up. I didn't realize, I hadn't even considered that. But it's important to realize that there is something inherently contradictory about a very ultra-wealthy guy upholding the law that protects other very wealthy people. And that's why having characters like Catwoman and a lot of his rogues gallery they're great foils because they're testing that. And he's also having to bend his own rules and learn and grow. And it's also why it's so important, as you said in our talk on Appointment in Crime Alley, it's important that we see the despicable wealthy people in Gotham as well.
Yes.
Because
you get it from all sides, right? You have villains showing that there's no way the cops could keep up. You have Bruce Wayne in all of these other episodes very much being part of the community, helping, giving money, but also being physically present himself in these places to help people.
Right.
And then you have the guys like Daggett or the CEO of Multigon who are clearly ultra rich and evil.
Yes.
And all of these things together put us in a place where I feel like we can work with Bruce Wayne.
Oh, of course. Yeah. No, I am still
but
personally
work
very
you have to do, right?
Yeah.
You have to do that work.
When you start to think, whenever you really start to think through Batman, what he's actually doing, what kind of laws he's upholding. When you get to Batman and the law, it gets really muddled.
It's muddled,
and it's I think it's a conversation worth having every once in a while about Batman. Like, how do we really feel about him making a statement like this? And it's important, and it's also part of why I love the character. And I am very pro Batman and very pro Bruce Wayne. But it's again highlighting the things we've talked about in several previous episodes. It's so important that we get those little tiny tidbits of him actually being active in his community and supporting. And you know, there are a lot of people out there who have problems with charity, but I will also say, like, again, this is a guy who very much wants to make the city of Gotham a better place. And ultimately, the law is probably not the right word. I mean, that's how he sees it.
Yes.
But I don't think it's the right word. It's really his code.
I'm going to circle around, God help us, to year one again. Because the interesting thing about year one, the way that it positions itself, is that Gotham City is such a cesspool of corruption. From the mayor through the commissioner, who's not Gordon at that time, all the way down to the street hustlers and pimps and pushers. Like, all the way down. It is impossible to fix Gotham City with the law. And I think that Frank Miller does do some things right.
Yeah.
He's kind of a deplorable human being by and large, but he gets some stuff right. And making the city so sick that only something like Batman could serve it is great. I mean, it is a smart move. But you get about 10 years down the line, and you do have these much more nuanced conversations. Gordon is in charge. Whatever you think about Hill as a good mayor, he's clearly a honest mayor. You have honest cops like Montoya. Bullock is a slob, but he's a good cop.
Right.
You've got all of that stuff going on. It's a different conversation now about the law. He can't not be Batman. The ship sailed.
Right.
And I think that this actually speaks to Catwoman's popularity, because 1940 is 1 year after the existence of Batman. She's been around for almost the entire time. Same amount of time as Robin the Boy Wonder.
Woo.
And I think this speaks to her longevity and her popularity, because she lets us ask those questions in a nuanced way that doesn't undermine Batman's need to be Batman.
Right. Exactly. Wow. That was a deep dive sidetrack there, Joshua, but I'm really glad we had it. Honestly, I don't have a lot more to say about the episode, because the only other thing I have to gush on here is the set pieces. They're all great. I like little touches. Like, I love how whenever Batman and Catwoman, by the way, great. I love the image of them tied together in a rope.
Yes.
I thought it's vaguely iconic, as in when I saw it, I was like, ooh, this is a cool image that I've seen somewhere, and it means something. I couldn't recall if it was the same episode.
It reminded me of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yes.
Like we have our heroes. They are working together, but still at odds.
Right.
Because they're back to back.
Right.
And also at a disadvantage, tied up. It's a good image.
It's a great image. But I think I took away from that, outside of that image, was how all the barrels were labeled explosive. The truck was labeled flammable on the back in big letters. And then you could see like the stream of gasoline or whatever the explosive substance was going all the way back to these boxes that said TNT in big letters. Early 90s animation and very telegraphed. It's funny. It reminds me of video games, because a lot of time video games have changed a lot in the last 3 or 4 years on this type of thing. But there was the longest time. It's like, hey, that barrel's red. I should shoot it, and it blows stuff up.
Right.
You know, it's very like,
I need a visual language here.
yes,
right, yeah,
right. It's just goofy stuff like that. I found endearing.
It is an abandoned military installation, like U.S. military installation. So it's not ridiculous that there would be some explosives left behind or munitions left behind. And then Red Claw's using it as a headquarters. So she's going to bring some of that stuff in. But it is, like giant stenciled letters, this will blow up.
Yeah, exactly. In case you guys weren't sure, this is going to blow up and it's going to be big.
Hey, did you guys know that Warner Brothers made this cartoon? Because, by the way, there's a giant box that says TNT over there that will remind you Warner Brothers made this cartoon. Is Bugs Bunny around here?
We're the Tiny Toons.
Exactly.
Yeah. I loved that Red Claw gets pounced on by a wildcat at the end. That was appropriate. I got a good laugh out of that one.
Yeah, it's a little out of nowhere, and Catwoman turning
absolutely
and being
nowhere.
like, "Thanks, friend," but I'm also like, well, at least you remembered the first 10 minutes of the first
Aquaman.
episode.
You know how Aquaman can just summon sharks and whales? Well, she's out in the wildcat territory. She can just summon her animal friends.
Sure, I'm fine with it. It is a really exciting couple of episodes with just a lot of really interesting things going on. And even in the places where it falls a little tone deaf, we can still find there's some meaning well underneath there, you know? So yeah, it's because, and the historical context of Batman Begins made it to where we had to go back and make it part of our lineup.
Right. For me, at least, I would not put this in the required watching batch.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think
it's good. There are good things in it, though.
If I were just wanting to give you like the most exciting episodes, I think so.
Sure.
Right? Like, because there's that much sort of action adventure. But yeah, as far as the most impactful or something like that, I agree with you.
Yeah, and it's also worth of note, I did some digging, and apparently Bruce Timm was never, ever satisfied with the portrayal of Catwoman on this particular show, just on this show in general.
That makes sense.
I think he had a hard time wrapping his head around her and how to best utilize her. And I think it's also worth noting that the Arkham games, which we mentioned in our last episode, had a totally 100 to 180 different version of Catwoman because she's just not that strong of a character in the show.
Yeah.
Now, I would be interested in revisiting her in future episodes to see how she shapes up, but none of her episodes really stick out to me in memory.
The one that does stick out is really bad.
Oh, for the wrong reason. Okay.
Yeah, it's really not very good. And she's only in it because of the cat puns, and the less said about it, the better.
Let's just go back and watch 66 Batman for Catwoman, okay?
All three of them.
All three of them. Before we go, I want to hear, you have any recommendations for listeners?
I have one inside baseball Batman recommendation and one that is less Batman focused. The less Batman focused one is Ocean's 11.
Nice.
It is a group of highly competent individuals screwing over a rich guy who deserves screwing over by stealing all his money. It's kind of the non-ecological version of Catwoman that I would like to see.
Okay. All
and
right.
it ties into my comic book suggestion.
Okay.
There is a comic book called Selena's Big Score, written by Ed Brubaker, drawn by Darwin Cook. If you have seen the animated New Frontier, the DC New Frontier,
I have.
That is done in Darwin Cook's style. Darwin Cook drawing Catwoman, putting together a crew to do a heist.
I like it.
It's excellent.
I'm into it.
I highly recommend it. Selena's Big Score.
Selena's Big Score. I think heist Catwoman is the way I want to go, because like here she's portrayed more as a cat burglar. I like the Ocean's 11 style. Way cool. It's way cooler, way sexier. Like, it's just more fun.
You can have it both ways too, right? Like you can put together the crew because you need people who aren't second story people. That's her job in the crew. I'm the mastermind and I do all the second story work. But I need a heavy, and I need somebody who knows how to blow stuff up, and I need a computer guy. I mean, yeah, you can do that thing.
I know this is probably was the attempt in the Suicide Squad animated movie. Can we just get like an Ocean's 11 style heist movie with DCAU characters? I know that was probably the intent of one of those Suicide Squad movies, but I don't think we quite got there.
I mean, you step in that direction with Marvel's Ant-Man, but not hard enough in that direction to make me happy.
Yeah. No. I am going to recommend the 2007 Western film 3:10 to Yuma. Why? Well, there's a train heist.
I accept it.
That's all I got going on off this one. I was having a hard time. I was like, what, stylistic? I'm like, no, heisting. Heisting's good. A train heist was my favorite set piece in this episode. It stars Christian Bale, Russell Crowe. Great cast. I think Ben Foster's in that one too, I think. So, written and directed by James Mangold, who would go on to write and direct both The Wolverine and Logan. So if you're a comic book fan who watches Marvel stuff, he did both of those. Both of those I would also recommend. So, heist movie. It's a good film.
I think we can team up on one, and it's a real low-hanging fruit opportunity.
Okay.
But let's talk about heists. Let's talk about generic Eastern European terrorists and bring them together in one place with Die Hard.
Die Hard. Always Die Hard. I will recommend Die Hard anytime. Oh my God, yes.
If you want to see another place where this less than stellar presentation of generic Eastern European terrorists comes in.
That's why Die Hard is amazing though, because they use that to it. That's the whole point. Like
absolutely, but also something of a cultural artifact that we can point to.
No, see, yes, that is a cultural artifact. But the thing is, Die Hard, the movie, they knew it was a thing.
Yes, they were already subverting it. It's very impressive.
It's very impressive for the time. But yes, absolutely, I think that's a great recommendation, Joshua. Die Hard. All day long. Well, Joshua, I think before we wrap up and close today's episode, we have a little bit of an announcement, yes?
Yeah. I would say that this wraps up our animated discussion of the entirety of Batman, the Animated Series, Season 1.
I would like to point out, if you want to hear us talk about other episodes in Season 1 that we missed, let us know via social media, which we'll tell you about in a second.
Absolutely.
Because I'm curious to what listeners might have to say about that.
If any of you have very strong feelings about something we skipped, hit us up, let us know. I am also slowly but surely working my way through them a couple episodes at a time on Saturday mornings. So you can follow me on Twitter for that. The hashtag is PD Saturday AM Tunes. The PD's for Pulp Diction. The Saturday morning cartoons are for Saturday morning cartoons.
Tweet along. It's a lot of fun. I haven't been able to participate myself yet, but I have watched your Twitter stream come in 2 hours later because I'm sleeping. But, hey. But this is the end of season 1, so I think we're going to be taking a little bit of a break. Not too long.
Yeah, a few weeks. Just know that there's going to be a break of a few weeks between season 1 and season 2, where we make a list of the episodes that we're going to cover and start talking about them and getting them recorded ourselves.
Absolutely. And if you want to make sure that you do not miss a minute or second of it, and you don't forget and it doesn't fall off your radar, you've loved it so much, but you want to make sure you remember to listen to the new episode when we come back, more reason to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or Google Play or any of your podcast apps out there.
Absolutely. So lots of opportunities for you to continue the conversation with us while we prep for season 2. Caleb, tell everybody where they can find you on the internet so they can continue that conversation with you.
In between seasons, you can always continue talking with me on Twitter at CMastersTalk. That's letter C, Masters Talk. Of course, my bread and butter is movies, so you can tweet about me about all the movies that you've seen. I'm sure by the time this comes out, we're probably knee-deep in Avengers season, so I'm sure I have many thoughts on the superheroes. But you can also find me writing every week at thecinematropolis.com. We also have a podcast called The Cinematic Schematic. We have at least one episode a month. We've been doing a lot of mini bonus-odes lately, but yeah, you can find us there. Again, that's the cinematropolis.com. Joshua, how about you?
Well, I'm also most active on Twitter at Joshua Unruh. In the meantime, check out my other podcast, Superhero University. I am talking about Batman right now. I guarantee it. And if you need a little break from Gotham City, you can also find me on Listen Up A-Holes with the fantastic Lonnie Diane Rich of Chipperish Media. We are going through every single MCU thing there is.
God bless you.
So until season 2, we'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel. Animated Discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. And if you can't support us financially, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. It's the best way to help others discover the show. Keep up with Pulp Diction news by following at Joshua Unruh on Twitter or find us at facebook.com/pulpdictionproductions. And a special thanks to Vinnie Hogan for our original theme music.